Andy is a futurist. He's a digital native who in 1994 wrote the book, The Secrets of the Internet. And as a technology pioneer and mobile thought leader, Andy works for Fjord, a worldwide service innovation and technology firm. His book will speak to ambient technology and how the world of technology systems, personal prosthesis, and technology may very well and will enhance life. Take it away. Round of applause for Andy Goodman.
Thanks for that. But I was listening to Adrian's talk just before, and so I think you can think of me as a much worse informed version of him, really, because he's quite the man in the futurology stakes. I'm a mere amateur, really. Actually, I do manage a design company, and one of the things that I particularly like doing, and some of my colleagues do, is writing what Adrian also referred to as design fictions. So these are like stories of the future. They're a way of rehearsing ideas for things that don't exist yet, and it actually gives us a good way of thinking about what we might want to build and make over the coming years. So the genesis of this talk was actually was probably about 3 years ago. I got invited to do a TEDx talk, and since then I've done a talk last year at South by Southwest and at Interaction 13. And then I was just luckily enough asked to author a couple of chapters for a forthcoming O'Reilly book. So one of my chapters is on Embeddables. The book is Emerging Technology, and it's not published quite yet. I think it's going to be out in a couple of months. So I'm going to do something I never do, which is read from paper. So normally I do this without notes, so it's going to be a bit of a new one for me. I think the last time I read out from a book was it was about dogs, and it was to a 10-year-old on a beach somewhere. So I'll try and up my level a little bit from that. Okay. So I think I'll talk for most of the time, and if there's one or two questions at the end, I'll take them. Embeddables, the next evolution of wearable technology that gets under your skin. Wearables are yesterday's news. Tomorrow's will be all about embeddables, tiny computing devices implanted inside your body that monitor your health, improve your functioning, and connect you to the digital world. There's currently a lot of buzz in technology and design circles about wearables, living services, the Internet of Things, smart materials. As designers working in these realms, we've begun to think about even more transformative things, envisioning a future where evolved technology is embedded inside our digestive tracts, sense organs, blood vessels, and even our cells. Everyday objects will become responsive and predictive, connecting us to the data sphere and reducing the distance between our skin and the surface of the made world. What we see further out, beyond the realm of wearables and implants, is the future symbiosis of the human body and the machine. 4 converging technologies are going to radically transform our interaction with the world: genetics, robotics, information, and nanotechnology. With a few exceptions, such as pacemakers and artificial hips, technology has always been at one distance removed from our bodies and brains, not for much longer. The interface between the made world and us is going to become almost invisible. The monolithic device with a screen may be on the verge of disappearing. It is being enhanced with numerous smaller devices, which may soon replace it as the way to access information. We will arrive at a more ambient experience, where sensors capture information about us and feed that information into systems quietly working away in the background. Wearables will give way to embeddables, nanoscale machinery inside our bodies, which can monitor us and modify us. These systems will act as mental and sensory prostheses, increasing our knowledge, perception, and manipulation of the world around us exponentially. The early uses we are seeing are in domains such as healthcare and fitness. They'll extend further to virtually any domain we can think of: communications, entertainment, socializing, learning, work, even self-actuation. Any human activity we can think of is going to be modified and amplified with an invisible mesh of data and processing that we will drift through, mostly obliviously. Embeddables are not just going to be a revolution in functionality, but will dramatically alter how people fit into society. They will affect human psychology and even propel us towards intellectual or spiritual transcendence. Just looking at visual experience and sensing, we can see how this could come about. Imagine being able to perceive different light frequencies, the world in microscopic detail, or far distant objects in the universe. This would have a profound effect on our understanding of reality and our place in it. Before we can start dreaming about the evolutionary acceleration that might be granted by these technologies, we have to come back down to Earth for a while. There are many practical barriers that need to be considered. Embeddables will be sitting so close to us that the right balance between unobtrusiveness and affordance will have to be found. Systems that can predict and even meet our needs without us having to intervene will be the ones that resonate and find an audience. We're already seeing, with the rather too rapid backlash against Google Glass, that people are very particular about what they put onto their bodies and how social deviance could become a big barrier to adoption. Parodies of people wearing Google Glass on shows like Saturday Night Live, and the fact that the New Yorker has dubbed early adopters glass holes shows exactly the problem with wearable tech. It can open us up for ridicule. The design of future wearables will need to subtly integrate with our clothing and our bodies, or become fashion statements in their own right, if they aren't to become an evolutionary dead end in the tech tree. Likewise, the design paradigms that we invent for these ambient systems, where the entire body becomes an interactive canvas, will need to steer clear of a different kind of social deviance. Maybe in future, we will become accustomed to the jerking, twitching, winking, nodding motions of the glass wearer in the way that it has become socially normed to browse your phone while someone is talking to you. Fubbing, that's called. But for now, it looks deeply peculiar. Whilst conversations are not mainstream yet, embeddables are emerging as a new topic for debate. According to a recent panel at VentureBeat, wearables, computers will soon be inside us, embeddables are going to have significant consequences for the delivery of digital services, as screen-based interaction becomes less prominent and possibly even disappears. We're going to discuss the scientific, social and creative context of the embeddable revolution, and discuss what you, as a designer or engineer, will need to take on board to operate in this space. What was once a craft based on visual cognition will change dramatically into one that takes account of the other senses and will need to be based on a much deeper understanding of human culture, rituals, psychology, physiology and motivation. Quite often, to see the future, we must understand the past. It's a cliche, I know, but humans have been interfacing with technology for thousands of years. We seem to be intrinsically built to desire the communion with the made world. This blending of the mechanical and biological has often been described as a natural evolutionary process by such thinkers as Marshall McLuhan in the 50s, and more recently Kevin Kelly in his fantastic book, What Technology Wants. So by looking at the long timeline of body modifications, we can see waves of change and future ripples. Humans have, for as far back as we have physical evidence, been changing the appearance of their bodies, both deliberately for art and seduction, and as an unconsciously instinctive action. The purpose can always be distinguished as one or two main categories. First, to modify states of social acceptance. Secondly, to improve physical attributes, and to repair or mask damaged or aging body parts. Far from the religious ideal of humans being born perfect, it is quite clear that we are painfully aware of our physical shortcomings, and will do sometimes quite extreme things to present a more pristine, memorable, or powerful image. The resigned capitulation to aging and death is certainly no longer a norm, if indeed it ever was. Few people are totally content with the bodies they ended up in. It's just now we have the capability to change them in a much more fundamental way, from the gene up. The enhanced human will have improved attributes such as sensing, thinking, aided by computation, and in more physical ways such as endurance, resistance, and longevity. If you think this is a distant prospect, recent developments in artificial organ technology and robotics are bringing this sci-fi scenario closer than we may imagine. Whilst it's too early to agree with Aubrey de Grey's assertion that we will be the last generation to experience death, it's safe to say that our children and grandchildren will certainly have a very different physical life experience than any humans that came before. If we define the two primary categories of body modification as decoration and optimization and repair, there is now a third category of body modification, brought about by GRIN, genetics, robotics, information, nanotechnology. We can call this extension. Actually, previous speaker also called it extension, which is interesting. Whilst it's unlikely that we'll be able to fundamentally change our physiology, We aren't likely ever to be able to fly, for instance. There are a myriad of enhancements to our standard functioning that will boost us in a dizzying range of ways. So before we plunge through into this future of the extended human, it's worth thinking a little bit about the past to see where the motivations and roots of this seemingly universal urge came from. What is it that makes people yearn to change themselves? And what is it about this urge that in the end makes us human? Changing the body, its shape, its colour, even its gender, is becoming acceptable in contemporary society. The roots of this inevitably go back much further than we would imagine. In India, there is the tradition of the transgender prostitute who has his penis removed and turned surgically into a vagina. Similarly, in Central Australia, there is an Aboriginal ceremony where a slit is cut into the urethral part of the penis to represent a vagina, and thus bring the female principle into the male body. Since the 60s, there have been many practitioners on the fringes of mainstream art and culture who use physical transformation to explore the way that societies use the body as a signifier of meaning. One example is Fakir Mustafa, who contorts, pierces, and hangs his body in ritualistic ways, which demonstrates not just his purity of mind, but also the extraordinary plasticity of the body. He makes references to the sun dance ceremonies and the path of purification, a 5th century Ceylonese Buddhist text, as well as the ways in which women are made to contort their bodies through dieting, restrictive clothing, and surgery. We often hear that nobody wants to put lumps of metal and plastic into their bodies. Nobody wants to look like the Borg. But perhaps this is not strictly true. Some people actively want to create highly dramatic interventions on their bodies. These people could be seen to be the early adopters, and in the same way that tattoos and piercing became an everyday fashion statement, perhaps these more extreme modifications will become normalized eventually. A Terminator-style robotic eye projecting scarily from your head might be just seen as a cool accessory in 20 years' time, especially if it plugs you in constantly to the grid and means you never need to miss a tweet or a Facebook status update. And what would the embeddable version of Facebook be like? We can see maybe some premonition of this in a recent advertising stunt in Japan, where young women were paid to have advertising displayed on their skin. A few rather foolhardy individuals have even agreed to have brand logos tattooed on their bodies. No doubt some clever marketing company in the future will persuade people to plaster themselves in advanced OLED film and spray their hair with nanoparticles that can change colour, the pixel becoming molecular. In this perhaps quite unappealing future, we lease our skin to advertisers who can display their latest products and services across the surfaces of our bodies. Animated solar jets shooting up your chest, and tropical holiday montages rippling across your back. Sponsored narcissism. If not advertising, then how about something useful? Emails could appear on the back of your hand. Your fingertips could glow blue when you're mentioned in a tweet. The entire display with all your social messages could appear on the inside of your wrist or open palm, or your hair and body could be used to broadcast your social status. Your hair could change colour to indicate your availability when you're sitting alone in a restaurant. We do like to have and hold shiny plastic and metal devices, but they're pretty annoying as well. Getting stolen, running out of batteries, being dropped and shattering on hard marble. Beyond the physical inconvenience of the device with screen, there's a deeper problem happening. And this is the connected but alone, Sherry Turkle's wonderful talk on that. The connected but alone alienation created by screen devices. Screen is in itself an interesting word. It simultaneously means an object we look at and something we hide behind. Even the small hand-sized device becomes a barrier in social situations, absorbing our gaze and taking us away elsewhere. But soon we may be able to discard the screen altogether. Voice-activated tech such as Siri, Tell Me, Google Voice, Connect, Nokia Drive all lead towards zero UI, where our gestures, voice and glances can all trigger interaction with systems that respond to us through our environment. Advanced context-aware automation will take us to the brink of a truly connected world, where sensors and embedded intelligence help us glide through space, subtly enhancing us and adding layers of information to the world. Humans are, in the end, analog beings. Our digital tools should only be an aid to the real, they should not replace it. So a combination of pigment-altering implants, some kind of evolution of OLED technology, voice control and ambient sensing will actually allow us to ditch the device entirely, to achieve a kind of telepathy, and for the body to become a remarkable interface to the digital world. The hope would be that this would actually start to break down the barriers of atomization and disconnection that we have blindly put up around us in the march to the future. The likely truth is that we have become even more distracted, self-absorbed, and disconnected from the physical world. Oh well. We are yet to devise interfaces that can effortlessly give us what we want and need. We must still learn some kind of rules and deal with an interpretation layer that is never wholly natural. Some early attempts at predictive interactions exist. The Japanese vending machine that recognizes the age and sex of the user and presents choices based on demographic breakdown, and the brilliant but scary ability of McDonald's to predict what you're going to order based on the car you drive with 80% accuracy. The latter was necessary, apparently, so the fast food chain could reduce the unacceptable 30-second wait while your driving order was prepared. The sensor world that made these kind of predictive systems possible will only become richer and more precise. Big data will inform on-demand services, providing maximum efficiency and total customization. It will be a convincing illusion of perfect adaptation to need. The new language will be ultra-subtle and totally intuitive, building not on crude body movements, but on subtle expressions and micro-gestures. This is akin to the computer mouse and the screen. The Mac interface would never have worked if you needed to move the mouse the same distance as it moved on the screen. It would have been annoying and deeply unergonomic. This is the same for gestural interface. Why swipe your arm when you can just rub your fingers together? What would be more natural than staring at something to select it, nodding to approve something? This is the world that will be possible when we have hundreds of tiny sensors mapping every movement outside and within our bodies. For privacy, you'll be able to use imperceptible movements, or even hidden ones, such as flicking your tongue across your teeth. Adrian also referred to that with his throat thing. Is this scenario really that outlandish? Let's look at the technologies being developed currently that might make it possible. First, we have immersive displays. Samsung and other technology companies are currently working on contact lens screens. These are experimental right now and suffer the problem of how they are powered. The answer to that may be very close to hand, though, as other research is being conducted into using the body's energy, both kinetic and heat energy, to power embedded devices. The next is the skin-top computer, or rather some kind of distributed circuitry on and in the body that can map movement and capture all kinds of body data, such as blood flow, temperature, sweating, hormone levels, and so on. First tattoo-like printed circuits, which you saw earlier, are already available. It might not be too long before a skin-top Arduino community emerges. Finally, there are developments happening in thought control. We've already seen early experiments in creating visual maps of dreaming people's thoughts. And though this is probably some distance from enabling telepathy, it is certainly intriguing. Crude mind control of computers has been around for some time, and in a rather alarming experiment conducted last year, one scientist could make a subject move his arm to push a button just by thinking about it. Both had nothing more than an electrode cap on and some clever code connecting the two. Apparently the subject could resist if he wanted, which provides some reassurance that we won't soon all become remote-controlled zombies. So, what will it be like to live in the embedded world? Technology often outpaces our ability to understand and accept it, especially if you're over a certain age threshold. Eventually, though, we normalize everything. Carrying a computer in your purse that is more powerful by a magnitude than those that ran 20th century corporations is no big deal. We just used to play Candy Crush mainly anyway. But it would have seemed inconceivable to previous generations. However, we can assume with some assurance that embeddable tech will have a much more profound effect on us than we can imagine. A famous experiment, the Libet test, attempted to measure how quickly a conscious mind can send a simple somatic control, e.g. press the red button. The extraordinary discovery was that the conscious mind triggers after the order is sent to the finger to push the button by a few microseconds. What does this mean? Essentially, an unconscious part of the mind is deciding to push the button, and the conscious mind is just agreeing with it. Imagine if we have systems operating in this way, running around us all the time. We would constantly have this disconcerting feeling that we are not operating under free will, but that some unknown force was driving us. Well, actually there are genes, as Richard Dawkins would point out. So how can we devise systems that don't force us down into the uncanny valley? We need to make magical systems where sensors, immersive displays, learning systems, mind and gesture control harmonize to give us exactly what we always wanted. Consider one final scenario. You're sitting at home drinking coffee from your embedded connected Nespresso service. The sensor in your tongue captures the response of your taste buds, and the little nanobot that has made its home in your veins monitors the release of endorphins into your bloodstream. The data gathered is sent to the Nespresso factory, which analyzes the readings and discovers that the flavour and caffeine levels are not creating an optimal response in your body. Later that day, you're standing at the bus stop. The Nespresso factory has custom-made a coffee that is perfectly suited to your tastes. It sends the aroma profile to an interactive poster next to you, which releases the delicious smell and tells you that the new flavour is available for delivery to your home. And of course, you'll get an introductory 15% discount if you purchase it now. Now, that's not really creepy in the slightest, is it? Well, this is just science fiction, right? Well, if the emerging technology curve approaches anything like the kind of acceleration predicted by such futurists as Kurzweil, Watson, and Kelly, the issues discussed in this chapter will become central to designing new digital services over the next few years. As designers and technologists, we must ensure we are prepared for the next wave, or we might just get left behind. The revolution is only just beginning. Thanks.